Hey everyone, I'm Jared McGriff. I head product marketing here at Hypertrack, and we are having a webinar today led by Ram Kakad, who works on the pre-sales side of the house. And this webinar is focused on improving customer experience for field service with location data. So here we'll talk about how accurate automated distance tracking um, is and real-time visibility will help companies in the construction and engineering and field service space improve NPS with location data. So with that intro, I'll go ahead and pass it to you, Ron. And thanks for
Thank
joining,
you,
everyone.
Jared, and thanks everybody for attending. Super excited to be here. My name is Ram Kakkad, as Jared mentioned, and I lead pre-sales, customer solutioning, and success over here at Hypertrack. As you'll know, Hypertrack helps you add live location to your Shiftwork marketplace and field services. And today we're going to dive into how this can help field services companies basically track the work that's being done in the field and automate workflows when you don't have eyes on the ground actually monitoring work. So just for some context here, the world is increasingly moving towards gig work, and in gig work, you oftentimes don't have people managing the workforce actively on site. And in that scenario, you still need to make sure that the work is getting done to your expectations or to your client's expectations. And if there is any issue, you're able to find out proactively. And since the workforce is somewhat removed from the core companies that are hiring them, location becomes a good way for you to validate that the work is happening as expected. And that's where Hypertrack comes in, where it helps you add live location to your stack and lets you retain ownership of the overall experience of your workforce as well as your customer but with the intelligence that location gives to it. So with that, let's dive right into how this actually comes together. Let me just share my screen. Yeah, are you guys seeing my browser?
Yes.
Cool, cool. All right, so what I have here is what we call in Hypertrack the order scoreboard, which basically captures all the work that's being tracked by Hypertrack for your business. An order in Hypertrack could represent a shift that's happening in the field. So for example, if I look at the row over here, this was created at 10 o'clock in the morning today. It's an HVAC order being fulfilled by a worker by the name Ian Ingram. And currently there is a risk associated with the order, which is that Ian is moving a little too slow for this particular order. So it'll evolve over time, but we'll see what happens. And yeah, all of these essentially represent work that are being done in different locations or a shift that's being done in a different location, right? And this gives you kind of like the bird's eye view of how your overall portfolio is doing for the day. So you can see there are 4 active risks of the 5 live orders that are going on. Day over day, things have been stable largely. You've had great visibility of all the work that you've been tracking through Hypertrack. And over here, we have some basic work health metrics, which is how many workers arrived at the destination that they were supposed to, how many of them arrived on time. And as you can see on the 26th of April, there was a bit of a dip in that. So something to look into. And how many of the orders were actually worked, which means that they were within an expected time of the shift duration. So if it's a 9 to 5 shift, and the worker was within 45 minutes of the overall 8-hour shift, then we consider that as a worked order. If it's less than that, then it might be a cause for you to dive deeper into it. And we've used 45 minutes as the threshold here because we've after speaking to lots of customers, usually a discrepancy of up to 30 to 45 minutes is not particularly dived into too much. And so that's considered acceptable at some level in some companies. And so that's the reason we have kept 45 minutes as the benchmark over here. So let's get into it. Now, once you actually want to see what's happening on a specific order or a shift, you can just click into it right here and get to the order timeline that Hypertrack provides. And so in this case, there's a carpentry order happening today, and it's scheduled at 10:05. Harry is going to be doing the order, and this is the order address, which is 4143 23rd Street, San Francisco. Now, Harry arrived at 10:06, so largely on time, nothing to worry about over there. He's still sort of on site, as you can see over here. He's in the destination. He was just on the way for about 2.5 miles. So some of you might have distance-based payouts. In that case, you need to know how much they're driving, and that's readily available to you both in terms of on the way as well as during the shift. As you can see, the shift is still ongoing. This is the place. So what we have over here is a very specific geofence mapped to the establishment shape that he's supposed to go to. And this helps you, again, generate much cleaner insights as to whether the worker is actually on site and doing the work or not. And the green area you see is basically the area that the workers tend to move around in, which well overlaps with the geofence. So that's a good sign. But yeah, this shift is currently in flight. It's only 10:06 right now for an 11:05 order that's ending for an order that's ending at 11:05. And so yeah, the worker's still there, and things are still in progress. Now let's go to some more interesting use cases in terms of how you can actually manage the work that you're tracking through Hypertrack. So in this case, there was an order for an electrician at 11 o'clock on 29th April. That's yesterday. Yeah, the worker arrived on time and stayed more or less for the right amount of time because it just says 2 minutes over the 4 hours expected time. So that's great. The worker's done the work as expected. But the interesting thing here is that the worker's actually been on site. The worker got here and spent an hour and then took a break, which is fine. I mean, everybody gets a break. But they were out on a break for about 15 minutes where they went maybe nearby. Okay, they went over here to probably have lunch and whatnot. And they finally came back to the destination at 1:11. Spent some time over there again for about 2 hours. But they finally did also take a second break. May have been a short, which seems like a shorter one. Yeah, so that's a 13-minute break that they took outside the destination. And finally, they came back, spent another hour over here, as you can see on the destination, and finally left at 4:25. So this is how you actually know at a very granular level whether the worker is spending time on site or not, and are they taking, some breaks. Oftentimes, so we've seen shifts that have allowed breaks of certain duration. So like up to 30 minutes for lunch is not flagged as anything, it's expected. And so those are not considered risks and things like that. And so you can do basically all of this automation and monitoring using live location through Hypertrack, and it already all exists in your stack. I think one other thing I'd like to mention is that I am walking through a UI here, which is the Hypertrack out-of-the-box UI. But everything you see on the screen here is available via API and as an embeddable view as well. So over here, you can see this particular embed link, and you can essentially embed this into your control tower if you want to have like a breadcrumb view for every shift that you're managing in your space too. The other thing we've seen as interesting is clock-in fraud. So, you have a shift that supposed to happen at a destination, in this case, it's an HVAC shift, expected to start at 3:35, and the worker here in the simulation is Walter White for obvious reasons. But if you don't know what the reasons are, go watch Breaking Bad. But in this case, what happened is, as you see, we started tracking at 3:30 for the 3:35 shift. Now, the worker actually tried to clock in over here on when they were at home. So if I just click out once more, the actual destination is over here, and this is where the worker was starting from when we started tracking. And they tried to clock in on their app, in the worker app that you provide them over here. But since they're outside the geo fence, Hypertrack essentially enabled you to check and validate that the worker was not on site, and you could basically disallow that clock in. So then the worker tried again. Everyone likes to try multiple times. Tried again, didn't work. So they tried 2 or 3 times. They finally realized, whoops, I need to actually get to work to be able to clock in. So they started driving, and finally, they got to office at 3:44, and that's when they were able to, clock in over here on the site. So yeah, they were not able to clock in when they were not on site, and that's essentially what live location can do for you. And yeah, they finally did clock out at the expected time, and so that worked out as expected. The other kind of scenarios that we see are late arrivals and fraudulent activities around location mocking. We do see it happen very often in the field where workers will install location mocking software to kind of trick the system into believing where they are. And so in this case, it's an electrician order for Peter Parker. The order was expected to start at 8:10. but the worker arrived at 8:55, and from 8 o'clock onwards, there was actually a mocked location signal that we detected because the worker was trying to spoof the fact that they were on site. But ultimately, they could not do that, and they were able to. We were able to, they started driving, and finally reached the destination at 8:55, which was 45 minutes late. And so that's again something that the ops team can look into and figure out if it's legitimate or not. Um, the other thing that you also often see in the field is no-shows. So, in this case, there's an appliance repair order that's supposed to start at 10:05, being done by Chris Carter. In this case, the worker never really arrived and never visited the destination. And so, yeah, we started tracking at 10 o'clock. 10:05 was the scheduled start time. The worker kind of drove towards the area, but ultimately, they were supposed to go over here. And you can actually replay this timeline, kind of like what you see in Uber, to just kind of understand what happened in real time. And so, yeah, the worker kind of made some progress towards it, made it look like he was going to go there, but finally ended up over here and just spent an hour over here and never actually visited the location. So there are multiple things that could be happening here. It could obviously just be a no-show straight up, or it could be that maybe the worker called in and was told by the office to come here. So this gives you, some data to look into that your ops team can double check and make sure that, there was no change in destination that the worker was supposed to, switch over to. Um, Finally, the other scenario that I'd like to just walk through here is the location outage. So, all of us have our own phones and all of us are aware of what location settings are on phones. And oftentimes workers who don't want to be tracked, they can deny the right permissions. And since, everybody operates by the rules of the operating system, Hypertrack gives to you the reason why sometimes location may not be available, even though you're trying to track your worker during work that's being done for you and on your behalf. So in this case, it's a foundation repair order at 10:05. And, we started tracking at 10 o'clock, but at 10:01, we realized that the app has gone into the background and background location permission has not been provided by the worker. So what this then means is that the OS will not provide location to you and you won't really know where the worker is. So we do our best to kind of understand what the worker might have done between the points we had location. And in this case, it looks like the worker went in an outage here and probably was missing location for about 4 minutes, and they finally got the app back in the foreground. But this is usually a behavioral issue that you need to educate your workers on so that, they can be provided the benefits of location tracking. Like, for example, if the worker was tracked, properly throughout the shift and everything looked great, then the worker could be provided automatic pay right at the end of the shift, and they don't have to wait for, all the timelines, et cetera, to be, the clock in sheets and clock out sheets to be manually processed, which can take like up to 30 days or more. And they won't have to wait for their pay in that case, right? So, there are incentives for the workers to act the right way, and the good actors will usually go by those, and the ones who don't are the ones that you can actually track from here. I think to end up to sort of wrap up the presentation, I just wanted to point you all to the Groundworks case study that we have on the website. You can simply come to the Hypertrack website, go to the customer section and find it. So Groundworks, as you all know, is a leading foundation repair company in the US, founded in 1985. And they basically do foundation and crawl space repair work. Very, very established in the space. Now, the interesting thing is prior to us engaging with them, they had a couple of different issues that they were, working through. One was, of course, the lack of visibility of work happening in the field. But beyond that, they also didn't actually have a great handle on how long it takes to support each appointment. They had some assumptions around the time it takes to do basic appointments. And that then sort of fed into their scheduling algorithms to see how much work they could give to each worker. And when they added live location through Hypertrack, and you can read about this through the case study, they were actually able to identify that some of the basic appointments that they expected would take 1.5 hours would take like 45 minutes. And so what that meant is that they could actually allocate work way more efficiently by now knowing how long it actually took, and that could increase their productivity of their workforce and ultimately grow their revenue. The other thing that was also very important for them was being able to get feedback from the customer because again, it's a consumer service. They don't have people in every house. monitoring the work, but ultimately the consumer needs to give them feedback. And so they had these NPS surveys that customers are expected to fill after the work is done. But what they realized was that the response rates in these surveys was actually very, very low. And all of us have experience with that. The last thing a customer wants to do is give feedback long after a job is done. And so they were actually hovering around the 15 to 20% fill rates of these NPS surveys. What they actually did was, once through Hypertrack, they knew the exact moment at which workers were leaving the site. They were instantly sending a feedback survey to the customer, and just purely changing the timing of it, making it more fresh and current, actually increased their NPS service rate, NPS survey completion rates from 15% or so to about 75 to 80%. So a lot more data from them to be able to engage with their customers and make sure they're happy. And that again is possible pretty much by having live location over there. So that's how Hypertrack has helped them. And we're excited to hear about more stories from such companies who would like to add location to their stack and improve overall business workflow and customer happiness.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ron. Really appreciate you going through the demo and that case study. We do have a couple of questions, and we also invite anyone to ask a question if you have it at this point in time. But one of the questions we have is around implementation time. So how long does it take customers to implement the solution that you showed?
Yeah, so we are an API first company and we work very closely with your dev teams to get this live. The quickest implementation we've seen to go live in production is 3 weeks from the first time we started actually developing to the time it was in production. So that's the shortest we've seen. Getting a hello world out there is like a day usually. It's very, very easy to integrate into your existing stack. And yeah, it really depends on how aggressively the dev team wants to move. And yeah, 3 weeks is the fastest we've seen.
Got it. Okay. And you mentioned that, as the other question is around how you customize. I know you mentioned we're API first company, but there's things that you talked about as far as like, how you're tracking risk and shift parameters,
Yep.
geofences. How are these things, even the type of risk or geofences or shift parameters, how are these things customized within the environment?
Yeah, I mean, there's many, many different layers of customization that are possible through a solution like ours. So right up off the bat, one is, how do you even ingest the signals, right? So the no-code way to ingest the signal is to basically, just come to the dashboard and see it. But if you want a low-code way to do it, you could directly embed this entire page in your control tower. And we've seen that happen where customers have basically embedded this entire page in Salesforce, and their ops team essentially goes to that and starts figuring out what's happening at a shift by shift level when they come here and search for one shift. But now, some other companies might have their own control tower and they don't want to embed this whole thing there. They want to just add like risks, for example, so that their ops team can know which of the shifts are at risk. So in that case, you can basically just use our APIs to get only the risks for every order and maybe track the distance if you need it for distance-based payouts and add those two as things in your control tower just as data points that you use for automation and to basically enrich the view that your ops team is already used to seeing or your customers are already used to seeing. So there's a whole bunch of customizations in how you consume the information. Yeah, and there's also, of course, customizations in how you integrate and what you track. So we have, pre-shift tracking, on-shift tracking, or full shift tracking. We have on-device geofence validations, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of configuration and sort of choices to be made in what part of your work you need to track as the most valuable. And so, of course, that's also possible at an API level.
Got it. Cool. And we have two more questions. One is about you mentioned the customer app or the mobile app that the customer had, and you went through the case study as well. What what was the customer app before for that case study? Like what were they doing before in terms of the customer facing app?
Yeah.
And also, I guess relatedly to that is like what if there is no app, a mobile app that faces the customer, and how does Hypertrack work with that?
Yeah, great question. So, the beauty of Hypertrack is that it sits within your existing technology stack natively. So prior to Hypertrack, the company had its own worker app, but it didn't have location awareness. And so what that meant was that they didn't know how long the workers were actually spending on site, which meant that they were estimating that it would take about 1.5 hours to do an appointment that actually took only about 45 minutes. And so they were effectively only allocating half the amount of work to the workers that could have been done, or, some percentage of the amount of work. So there was a super huge loss of productivity over there, right? And so, the tech stack fundamentally stays the same, but gets enabled with location through Hypertrack. And what was the second part of the question?
What if
Yeah.
there is no
Yeah,
app?
if you don't have an app. Yeah, if you don't have an app, that's an interesting question. So, prior to, consumer location technology or device-based location technology, the only way to track location was for you to basically have devices that you distribute to your workforce, like a GPS thing that sits on the phone or sits on the car and whatnot, right? And while that has been the legacy approach and it still works for certain approaches, for certain, use cases where, have high value assets that need to be tracked and stuff like that, the new age solution for the gig workforce is to go via mobile apps. I mean, Uber has changed the world in that sense. Everybody has a phone and everybody has awareness of how location can be used to manage work. And, just providing that experience to your gig workforce is the most natural way to do it now. And that's what workers expect. They don't want to have to manage extra devices that you track them through. And, retrieving devices, managing devices, maintaining devices, a whole new ball game that businesses don't need to take on right now. Go with mobile apps. That's the way to go.
Got it. Okay. And then the last question is about related to privacy. So in your example, you showed that the worker was tracked when they went off site, and it showed that they were in another location. Um, would a customer be able to um, not have that information tracked, or is how basically if there are any privacy issues associated with tracking throughout the whole time when they're not even on breaks and things like that, is that
Right.
possible to
Right.
implement and Hypertrack based on like my own privacy criteria?
Yeah, so multiple different ways to configure these things here. So, there are different stakeholders in this entire ecosystem. One is, of course, an end customer, like a site manager who you're providing the workforce to, and two is your internal team, the ops manager. Now, y'all have already, I mean, if you have signed up a worker to do a 9 to 5 job, maybe your ops team would like to know throughout 9 to 5 where the worker is and they need full visibility. But maybe the end client may not want to know where the worker is outside the, boundaries of the establishment they're expected to work at. And so we do support customizations around, being able to view selected parts of the timeline and not others. And so, that's something we can take into, a discussion specific to the use case. With the customer who needs that, because there's usually a lot more nuance around who should see what, and it's all possible.
Got it. Okay, let's see if there's any more questions. I don't see any more questions here. Thanks for going through that with us. Really appreciate your time. If there are any questions from the audience in the future, you can always reach us at help@hypertrack.com, and we'd be happy to answer your questions or show you more of the product. So thanks for attending, and Ram, again, thanks for your time.
Thank you.